Are you a curious person and a music lover just like me? Well, if the answer is yes, this is your podcast. Hi, I'm Ramon Mañas, I'm the travel sax creator, and welcome to Blowing in the Wind, the place to get inspired throughout music and innovation. Let's talk. Hi everyone, and welcome to Blowing in the Wind episode number 7. Today I have the honor of interviewing Dan Sullivan. He's an engineer. He has designed many electronic instruments, and he's well known for being the CEO and afterward the CTO of Zibix, which is the company that designed and developed JamStick, which is the smallest MIDI guitar. I think it's a great podcast for all of you guys that are interested in maybe developing your own company or try if you're an inventor and wants to know a bit more how to create or what are the steps that you need to follow to start your technology company. I think you will like this episode. Again, let's start. Hi Dan, how are you? I'm really happy to have you here as our next guest here at our podcast, Blowing the Wind. For me, just to start, right? We met each other last week, so we haven't met that long ago, and I was talking to you, and I was like, oh wow, I need to ask you so many questions that I would think that could be interesting for the people that are listening to our podcast, because as you may know, right, our podcast it's talking about innovation and music. So you are the guy to talk to. Just as a background, right? Your name is Dan Sullivan. You're from Minneapolis, right? From the US. Mm-hmm. And your background is engineering, right? You're an engineer. Yeah. And you have designed a lot of really cool music instruments, and one of or the most, at least the one I knew before was JamStick, which is a MIDI guitar, right? But you have designed and developed many more. So first of all, thank you for for coming here at our podcast. And can you please explain us who you are? Because my introduction it's very very light. So I think it's better if you can just talk yourself. Yeah.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here. People always like to talk about themselves, and I'm no exception, I guess. So. I won't start with when I was born and all that, but basically what's relevant is love music and electronics. So I've been fortunate to be able to find ways to combine those interests. I play music kind of unprofessionally, although I played in some bands, but just have always really enjoyed it. And it's always a nice escape from engineering. And so early on, I was able to find ways to combine those interests way back when, because I started a long time ago, because I've been on the planet a long time, so longer than I want to admit sometimes. But anyway, and when I went to in university, I started designing kind of musical type of gizmos, for lack of a better word, and then went on exchange to Europe and spent a summer kind of busking around the street and playing for cafes on the French Riviera and sleeping on the beach and that kind of thing. It was, of course, nice to be 21, too. I'd love to go back there. But anyway, really discovered kind of how fun it was to sort of, first of all, make money yourself directly, which is kind of why I wanted to go into more of being an entrepreneur versus working at a company. Just found I really enjoyed playing music with other people, how much of a universal language it is. And so when I came back, I started working, there's a there's a long story behind that, but I'll skip over that. But I was living in Boston and living in a place with 5 other engineers in one place, and all of them worked at a company called ARP, which is one of the early synthesizer companies. So at some point, I was approached by investors with the idea of developing a consumer synthesizer, because at that time they were very expensive and professional. And so one of my regrets, I guess, but was that I, despite having made a prototype and it was all ready for production and the plastic case was made and I spent a couple of years working on it, ARP went out of business, and so the investors decided that there's just no market for a home synthesizer. And this was years before Casio, and so I figured someday I'd just be drinking out a bottle in an alley and telling people I designed the first consumer synthesizer. But anyway, you know, a lot of people have ideas, a lot of smart people in the world. It's hard to, you know, just about everything that you can come up with, somebody says, oh, I thought of that. But the trick is kind of really keep going and actually making a prototype. So that's kind of been my orientation, is try to take an idea and take it to a prototype stage and then see if I can get some interest in it, rather than, it's tough just talking about an idea to people, because lots of people have ideas. So a lot of the things that I showed you were a lot of kind of crazy ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but I've always had a lot of fun sort of thinking of ideas and what the possibilities are, because I think you know, what I saw from an engineering perspective is that there's so much opportunity for new kinds of expression and new kinds of expressing musical ideas, and of course these days there's a lot of people who recognize that, and so it's a fantastic time to be experimenting with different kinds of electronics and music. So and there's a lot of brilliant things out there now. So I'm still a little frustrated though at how it hasn't, you know, it's sort of mainstream, but there's a lot of tradition in music, and for such a creative field, and you may have seen this sometimes when you have some sort of new instrument that deviates from the mainstream, as you have, and like the JamStick, it's not always welcome. Sometimes people are really actually angry or resentful, like this is not the way you're supposed to do things, but that's always true when you do something new. So anyway, so since you know, I had started a couple of companies. One was more in audio and video, and called Visual Circuits. I sold that to a public company, but my stock was locked up for a year and I couldn't sell anything. And by the time I could, it pretty much went out of business. So I decided, well, what do I really want to do? And I went back to kind of doing more for music and electronics, and that's where I founded Zivix, with the idea of making sort of some accessible musical instruments for, you know, that are easy to learn. And more importantly, I think, to me, I've been fortunate in being able to play music well enough to be able to improvise. And, you know, and it's a great feeling when you can improvise and play with other people. And so the idea with JamStick and some other things, where, you know, try to find ways where people can learn easily, jump into it, maybe without having to go through years and years of lessons to improvise. And I can talk more about that later. But that's the long version of what probably you wanted as a short version. But anyway, I can talk forever. So go ahead with your questions.
So why did you decide going and creating your own company versus working for someone that's related? I mean, you can still work for someone that has, for a company that was developing some kind of JamStick or whatever, or travel sax, you know? Why entrepreneurship versus working for?
Well, because I'm more than a little bit crazy, because actually you have to be, although I'm a logical person as an engineer, if you're really logical, you'd never want to start a company. Yeah. So you have to have some sort of ambition and drive to do something that is, you know, that you have to kind of forget the odds of success are pretty low. But if you really looked at that, then nobody would do anything. So I think it's just more, again, I think my experience kind of, after I graduated from college too, I spent a year just playing music and having that sort of freedom. And I think that's always been really important to me, is not being too constrained and that feeling where I'm gonna do this. And several times it's worked, it hasn't worked, and sometimes it works. But I think for me, the most important thing is just perseverance and just keeping going. And more importantly, I think, having something, for me it was important that's meaningful that I want to do, that is also a lot of fun and challenging. And, some people like to solve crossword puzzles, and I like to sort of do engineering. And that's what I've always liked, to the point where when I started the companies, I pretty quickly realized that, although I love doing engineering, managing people and, although a CEO, both times I realized that it's not really what I like to do best. So in both cases, I hired a CEO and that was a great combination in terms of combining skill sets. So I think it was really interesting for me I'm used to designing circuits, to sort of design a company and see how important, the people are just as important as the component you choose for a circuit, right?
Exactly.
So they all have to work together. And so, as you've seen as well, but and I think most people find out. So, so that's the main reason for starting a company. It's been sometimes great, sometimes horrible, but that's, it makes things more interesting if you kind of have some control over what you do versus sort of being told what to do. So, and then of course you can't blame somebody else for your mistakes. That's the only problem with that.
Exactly.
And there's been plenty of those. So,
would you have done, if you would be Dan Sullivan with 20 years, would you, and with the know-how that you have right now, would you would you change something about your professional trajectory?
Well, that's always going back, is everything in retrospect is a lot easier.
Exactly.
And I don't know if I mean, because a lot of times the bad mistakes really were, there's sometimes no other way to learn. I mean, you can learn about wanting to be an entrepreneur. I think working with more experienced people early on would have been good. I kind of was very stubborn. I think there's a good side and a bad side to being, to be an entrepreneur, start a company, to do this. You have to be pretty, perseverance and stubbornness go together, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes just not taking no for an answer. But I think I found it's really important to work with the right people, because it takes a group, and no one these days, especially, it's getting harder to do anything by yourself in your basement. For Zivix, for example, I was 2 years in the furnace room working on something, but then it took a long time to get started after that, mm-hmm. until I really moved into another place and started working with other people and seeing how surprising it is that, sometimes it's hard to know what your strengths and weaknesses are until you find out the hard way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So I don't know if I'd go back. I mean, I guess if I could go back 20 years, I would happily go back there and stay there and not have to get older. So.
Exactly. Why music? And
yeah, that's an interesting question. I like to read sort of psychology books and things like that, just as an amateur, and it's always, in terms of it's always puzzled me, what is it about music? I like to read books about evolutionary psychology, why do people act like they do? Because sometimes as an engineer, the stereotype is you try to play logic to other people, and that never works. So even with yourself. So I think it's, you can explain a lot by tens of thousands of years ago, how cultures form, why people do what they do. But to me, it's music is a very mysterious thing. Why have all cultures always done music? Why is it so compelling? And just about every culture, it's been really important, and it's not really explained very well in terms of like what is it about all of humans that the music is such an important aspect. I mean, not everybody, of course, performs it, but most people like to listen to it. And so to me, it's really compelling to sort of figure out what is it about music that is so interesting? Why do people want to do it? And so but a lot of people don't have the tools or the access to be able to create. They're more passive listeners. So I've always liked the idea of having people that have no experience with music see what they can do with using technology to sort of experiment with making sounds and the satisfaction of making them fit. And there's a lot of satisfaction once you get to a certain point in music to just once you reach past a critical point, because learning is always hard, just to be able to enjoy what you're doing and what you're playing. And again, I think I've always been interested in, are there tools you can do to help with that process, to get past the hump of where it's just boring practice and to where you can enjoy your own playing.
Exactly.
So
I guess also how to manage the frustration of the first steps, right? And engaging and being, basically engaged or motivated to actually practice. Because if you want to have like a minimum level to start enjoying playing an instrument, for example, you need to invest a lot of time on that instrument to be at least decent, right? Or I mean, it's not the same with all the instruments, but I guess with many of them, like the guitar, the piano, it takes a while to actually have like a minimum level to actually start enjoying. So yeah, I totally understand your point. As the creator of the JamStick, which I think it's a super interesting concept, which maybe you can explain a bit better to our audience. But why creating a MIDI guitar, a portable MIDI guitar, right? I'm not sure if I'm defining it the best way, but maybe you can talk about more.
Yeah, the JamStick came about, and again, it's hard to be the sole creator of anything these days. I mean, so there's a team behind it that like Exhibits that were very talented and all that to sort of bring it into production and move it forward. But a lot of times, what I see is people who create something, the story gets rewritten to like, oh, I always thought of that. But generally, it's much more of a zigzag path where, I had worked on some pretty crazy instruments just out of interest. I think I showed you one that was this. I have it back here. That this was the before the JamStick did this crazy thing, which just combined strings and frets and all the electronics so that you could play with two hands. And the idea was to make sort of an instrument that was to be more logical to play, and opened up, it was a MIDI instrument. And so I showed that around to people and got a lot of funny looks. And, the problem is like, well, who are the teachers for this? And I just love the idea of a novel musical instrument that could be easy to learn to play and so on. I'm not, of course, the only one that's thought of those sorts of things, but it's always hard to get traction again with something that's new like that. Anyway, so I showed that around to a bunch of people and was fortunate to be able to find some people who, and this is typically the case, is like with a lot of prototypes I've made, and I think in general, where the original idea you have, it's like, well, that is an interesting idea, but it's not going to go anywhere ever. So, but since you can do that, what about this? And I think that's the synergy you get by working with other people. Is it's easy to get stuck in your own ideas, and again, being stubborn and obstinate can be a good thing or a bad thing. So, in discussing with other people, they at the time Guitar Hero, at the time the JamStick was really started, the Guitar Hero was everybody was doing Guitar Hero, of course, until nobody was doing it. So the idea of working with the thing that the crazy thing is, to show you what, used infrared sensors. I was experimenting with infrared sensors that can tell where your fingertips are. That's how that worked. So I thought the idea of building those infrared sensors into a regular guitar would enable people to play Guitar Hero game, but then have a real guitar. And so actually made a prototype, worked with some other companies to actually develop a guitar, worked with Peavey and Larry Fishman and stuff. And we actually made a guitar called the Hero Maker guitar.
So sorry, what time was that?
Let's see, it was it's probably more than maybe 10 years ago. It's when Guitar Hero was everybody was doing it, whatever that was, what year. And so we went pretty far in actually developing a real guitar that could play the game, and got a lot of interest from people like Fender and so on. But at the time, Gibson Guitar was kind of suing everybody about a patent they had about Guitar Hero, and so there was a lot of hesitancy. By the time we got ready production, suddenly nobody was doing Guitar Hero. So we so what do we do for the next phase? We kind of turned it into, started to think about, well, if you can do the sensors on a few frets to play Guitar Hero, what about doing it over the whole guitar? And so that eventually led to, well, then you don't have to have a guitar form factor. What about making something portable and having it able to interface with sorts of mobile devices that were fairly new, like iPad and iPhone. And so that we worked pretty early on with Apple as well, helping to work with Bluetooth MIDI. We were one of the first to implement that standard on the JamStick, so that the idea was a wireless guitar that you could learn on your tablet or your computer, and so kind of went from there. So that's the long history there. Where JamSticks, again, it was not like, okay, I'm going to start a company and make a JamStick. It's just basically, again, all those things were failures in one sense, but they were building blocks to change. And I think that was the tough part, is like you get really your hopes set for something, but it just doesn't work. But maybe there's some other path that it can go into. So, because a lot of the technology behind this original thing went into JamStick, the infrared sensors, which we patented, and for your finger, that tell us where your fingertips are. And so it led to, it led to different things that weren't necessarily expected. Although it's nice to go back and say, like, oh, hey, well, this had this idea, we just did this. But I find it's rarely like that. Maybe in your case, it was more you knew you wanted to do a travel sax, but but it was a very odd path to the JamStick.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, in my case, as I explained, it was a pure necessity, right? I needed to practice silently and maximize my practice time. So I wanted to have something that was super portable, just like the JamStick. So that's why I really like the idea that you can really practice whenever and wherever you are, right? So it's definitely a big relationship between these two instruments, but definitely two different paths to getting to the final product. So, and well, of course, I guess you play a bit the guitar, right?
Yeah, guitar and banjo, actually, because banjo I've always played for fun. I like kind of the ragtime banjo, and it's not to me it's not a very serious instrument, but that's okay, because it's like if you try to play concert violin, you have to be really, really good at it, or you don't play it much. But banjo, it's fun to learn. Of course, Bela Fleck took the banjo and took it, and he's my banjo hero. In fact, one of the things I made was a MIDI banjo. So that instrument pretty much offends everybody, because traditional bluegrass players don't like it because it's electronic and a synthesizer. Of course, electronic people don't like it because it's a banjo, but I have fun. So at some point, it's like, I'm just going to do things that I like to do and not worry about. I mean, not everything has to be like, well, what's the product of the market for it? And sometimes I wish I had thought about those things some more, but as long as I have fun doing it, I'm probably still going to continue to do things that just, out of interest and seeing what you can do and just enjoying that. So. So the MIDI banjo, that's not going to happen.
Not working. Anyway. I love all these new creations, and that's why I wanted you to be part of this podcast. Talking about new creations, you just shared with me some of the instruments that you have developed, and I would like to hear from you about this. And I'm just gonna to share for the ones that are listening. You can just go to our YouTube channel and see the images that I'm gonna project right now. But if not, you can just hear, and we will try to describe it as much as we can. So basically, I have here a band demo 2, which is. It's a wand. I'm gonna try and play some. So this is a wand, right? This is a very special instrument. Could you explain what was the origin of creating this? It looks very easy to play, and I think it's a great tool for kids or someone that doesn't have actually a super training on music, right? And still can enjoy a lot the expressivity of this instrument. So just
so one of the products that we designed at Zivix, it was called Air Jams, and basically we're experimenting with kind of an accelerometer, and we knew how to do Bluetooth MIDI. So the idea of combining those things where it would make it easy for people just to like play this pick. So then I sort of extended it. Well, rather than just this up and down motion and triggering notes, the idea is, you have this accelerometer, and you can, and certainly other people have experimented, are still experimenting with that. So,
just to try and describe what's a wand. It's like a tube, right? That's basically has an accelerometer, which is a type of sensor that if you move it on one axis, or it depends, you can even move it in different axes, and each different axis can be triggering different sounds, right? So something like this.
Right. So it's pretty straightforward. And they're called IMUs, which are inertial. They've gone a long way. That was just a accelerometer, 1 or 2 axes. But the basic idea is you move it around in space, and you can convert that to MIDI notes that are then transmitted to like an iPhone or an iPad or Android or whatever. And people have experimented that for a while with wearable things and so on. But it was more of an experiment to put it into something that could be like a toy. So I went to the Toy Fair in New York, and that's why I made that video to kind of show around, but didn't really get any traction with it. It wasn't, it's not, a lot of times what I found is sometimes I do things just for sort of musical expression and to have fun with it, but especially in the toy industry, people want to, and they want to see a game, they want to see point, they want to see some way, it's less of a toy and more of a sort of a easy musical instrument. So it's hard to get any interest in manufacturing it. So it kind of was just one of those things that didn't go very far. But I think I showed you some other ones. I kind of there was a few years where then I didn't do anything with it, but then I wanted to pick it up again. And so there's other evolutions of the wand that I just thought would be really fun. And I tried to get some interest in with some other companies, but so far haven't gotten much interest. And so, but I found now that the issue is it as you know, manufacturing a hard piece of hardware is it's not easy. There's a lot of headaches involved.
Yeah.
So I've been, but I've always loved the idea of doing musical instruments. So what I'm actually doing now is in virtual reality, there's a awesome program called Patch XR or Patch World. So I'm in that you can do in VR, connect all the wires and all the things like in the early synthesizer days, but also it's sort of a playground for creating your own instrument. So kind of making the version of a wand in VR, and then you don't have to manufacture it. So so they've made a great platform, I think, for experimenting, and it's I think really a great example of how things have evolved to now, where being able to create your own instruments now is not, you don't have to be an engineer to do it. And I think it's really gratifying to see that there's that sort of creativity, that it's really a tool for enabling other people to experiment. And that's always fascinated me. That's what I've sort of tried to do. But when you get to have to manufacture something, you're faced with a whole other set of logistics, and it takes a lot of money to do. So the wand is still something I'm maybe hoping to do someday. But again, I see a lot of people, there's a lot of smart, creative people in the world. There's some interesting things going on with it's a rather obvious idea to take, all the motion sensors and so on and try to make it expressive musically. Yep. But again, there's a lot of inertia, there's a lot of resistance to something that's that new. So anyway, so right now it's just it was just made for fun, and maybe it'll go someplace someday. But in the meantime, I kind of enjoyed playing around with those kinds of things.
So you're talking about a very interesting technology, which is VR, right? And how VR can, for someone that's trying to design his or her instrument, or just trying to even experience with new instruments. Can you explain more about this technology, and how do you see the future of VR being changing or giving something extra to the musical context?
I think it has tremendous potential in the sense that it's a lot more accessible than a VR headset isn't inexpensive, but there's a lot of interest, obviously, during COVID about playing music over the internet, and there's some limitations there that continue to make that difficult. But there's a whole other realm where that of both collaboration and experimentation yourself with that VR or there's other ways to do it. But I have just been a big fan of VR. Was involved in Second Life long ago, and that was going to be the next big thing. So that's another whole story. But in Second Life, designed like these interactive music pads where avatars could create music together by interacting and by dance. Dancers could step on these dance pads, and the trick there, it was based on a game that Zivix had developed. Back when Guitar Hero was big, all these loops, essentially loops that can work together, that are in sync. And so whatever loops you choose, you're interacting with these loops and you're creating new music, but it's always different. And so in Second Life, I was a big fan early on, and spent a lot of time in fact, designed, hooked up with some people from different countries and made a virtual band that they still play there and they still get tips and, how to connect, over the internet and then be patched into Second Life, which is, I guess, pretty straightforward in retrospect. But it was really fun to see the opportunities for this new sort of online world where people can represent themselves as an avatar and then interact and play music. So I thought there was a lot of potential for that. But then when VR came out, it's a much more immersive thing, and there's a lot of amazing programs for both easy music creation on an individual level and then collaboration. And Patch World has, is moving more in that direction of multiplayer where people can interact. And the trick, though, is always, with that we've sometimes struggled with at Zivix is, making music easy to create is a nice idea. If you make it too easy, then
it's not that good, right?
It's not. It's like, well, it gets boring pretty quickly. If you just push a button and you can make a song, now you can say, okay, well, with the AI technology, they call it. Of course, everything is AI, but is a fad. But there's a lot of programs that you can get, a lot of even free ones. You can push a button and you can make an original song. Okay, so it's really an interesting dilemma where, how do you distinguish that from, somebody who creates a song with meaning and emotion and this. And so now you can say, well, now there's a music creation tool. You push a button and you have your own unique song that nobody's ever made before.
Yeah.
But it has to be a little difficult, I mean, or else so it's a really interesting trade-off to be made in terms of, making something too easy, but also not making it too hard. And I think that's what always is the challenge. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get into designing these musical instruments is having two boys. And like a lot of people growing up, you see how compelling getting into video games is. And so with the JamStick, one of the goals was, well, maybe, if you can use the medium that all young people swim in now, which is all, iPads, iPhones. I mean, I don't want to sound like an Apple here, but all the electronic platforms available, and it's often used for games. And the thing is, if you get to be my age and you talk about how high score you got in these games, I mean, nobody cares. But if you can play an instrument, it's something you can do for the rest of your life. And I've always been impressed when I've watched some bands or jazz bands, especially, where initially you see people with, they might be 70 or 80, and they got their white hair sitting there, and they're sitting next to 20-year-olds, and you see them as young and old people. But as soon as they start playing music, suddenly all that disappears, and you can just say, oh, this guy sounds great. This person sounds great. Look how they sound together. So I think that's been an inspiration for me to be involved in that sort of world of music creation and trying to help find ways to get kids into playing music in a fun way versus just doing video games. But it's always a challenge to make it. So it's challenging. But the reason I brought up video games is the good video game designers and creators understand really well how to make something that is just on the border between too frustrating and too easy.
Exactly.
And keep guiding you along, where you're in that flow state where time goes by and you're just a little bit frustrated, but you get a little bit of reward enough to keep going. And so I think there's a lot of potential to do that in music. But it's always a challenge to find something that is that right kind of balance. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, and I don't even remember what the question was. But anyway, but in VR, it opens up a lot of possibilities, and there's a lot of things that are make it possible to really dive into music creation and build that skill set. So anyway, I'm pretty excited about what's going on. And there's a lot of programs in VR. I don't know how popular they are, but certainly it's nice to see that a lot of the things that I've tried to do in hardware now are a lot easier to do.
Of course, VR, it's one. And then we have AI and machine learning. I think this is just game changer with ChatGPT. It's just changing the way we can access very, very interesting knowledge. And I know there's a lot also going on music, on the music industry, right? For writing lyrics, for creating music. And what's your opinion on AI?
I think it's fairly interesting. Again, the same. What is, again, if you can push a button and make a song, or push a button and make an artwork, then what is that?
The value, right? Of
the value,
the art,
right? If anybody can do it, and I think there's a place for it, and whether or not, it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. That when a technology like that comes about, it's kind of like, in photography 100 years ago, or 50 years ago even, you'd have to afford a really expensive camera. You'd have to study photography, and then you could publish picture. But I don't envy somebody who wants to be a professional photographer, because especially, as it became really ubiquitous and inexpensive to get a camera, and the barrier to entry was very low, and everybody could call themselves a photographer, and so you get deluged with this thing. And then that's kind of similar in music, and now it's the next level with AI. You can even you can generate photography without even having a camera. So so I just think it's interesting. I don't I'm not it's hard to be for or against it. It's like a hammer or something. It's it's a tool, and how it's used will be interesting. But it is challenging for creative people when the barrier to entry to creation is lower. On the one hand, it's a good thing. People are, I think, most human beings feel satisfied if they can do something creative, and now it's become a lot easier. But when everybody, but a lot of people want to stand out in some way, that this is their creation, they can be proud of and show off. And if there's a deluge of they're competing with these images, for example, or music that somebody just pushed a button and made, it's interesting conundrum. But I don't know, more music in the world isn't a bad thing, and eventually I think what people like to listen to will win out. It's a tough question. I don't think there is an easy answer. I think everybody individually has to decide whether, if they, if you hear a song and you like it, is just in a way, does it matter if it was made by an AI or a person? So, it's a very interesting philosophical question. So I wish if I was a philosopher and a long beard, I'd be stroking it and trying to come up with something that sounded very intelligent, but I'm afraid that I'm not your guy there.
Of course, no, it's just because for me it's very important, right? How the laws will protect the artists and the creators. I think that's a huge challenge, definitely. But not just for the music industry, for everything that's related with AI. But still, I think it's too powerful to stop it, and it's gonna create amazing things on one side and catastrophical things or not that good things on the other side. That's part of the evolution technology, for sure. Just changing a bit on the topic. What are your artists that have influenced you more, or that you are normally hearing the most on your day-to-day?
I haven't really ever gravitated toward one person or another. certainly for the banjo, Bela Fleck, but you know that he that's another whole world, and there's a he's somebody I admire for taking an instrument that was in a certain niche and expanding it. He's played, you know, I don't know if you know about it, he played with Chick Corea and plays a lot of jazz and sort of take it. So I admire somebody who can take something existing in a new and creative realm. Actually, you know, in terms of music, I have pretty eclectic taste, and don't really gravitate toward one artist. I like jazz, but what I really like to see is the creative use of electronic sounds, because I've been frustrated for a long time, ever since ARP days. It's like, why, you know, now you can make any sound you want, right? And people still gravitate. There's a lot of tradition, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like with MIDI guitar, it's, you know, people want to sound like a guitar. MIDI guitar is not really very mainstream, even though now you can sound like any instrument. But in general, there's a lot. I've always been a little frustrated that I think the potential for electronic music and sounds has not really been as popular, I guess, as I thought it would be way back then. So what I really actually like to listen to sometimes is dance music.
Okay. Wow.
Well, and like rave music, and not so much because musically it's a lot of times it's very formulaic and kind of, it's not like you're really interesting to listen to, but I love the sound. That's really where the sound design of the you know, that's really where creativity is freely expressed in terms of the kinds of sounds that people create on their tools, you know, their home workstations, you know, because all the tools to create all these crazy electronic sounds that they don't bother to try to imitate a real instrument. And that always bothered me when I was designing this synthesizer way back when. I would get paid by investors like, well, okay, when it sounds like a piano, we'll give you another check, right? And it's like, well, if you want to sound like a piano, play a piano.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you know, the idea is that synthesizers, I think, to me, should, you know, open up a whole world of other sounds, and I hear that in, you know, the sort of dance music that creative people is sound design. So so even though I'm not playing that all day long, when I hear, I kind of like to collect, like I work with Ableton and things like that. You know, there's a lot of toolkits you can get that people, you know, contribute sounds, and you can kind of make your own. But that sort of experimentation with just unique sounds, I think, is to me really nice to see. So anyway, but there's not like one particular influence, I would say.
I'm just curious about Bela Fleck now. Is Bela Fleck and the Flecktones? Is that it?
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
So for example, I'm gonna try and play a song. That's Big Country.
That's very traditional, right? He plays both traditional, but the Flecktones play. He's also got a electric banjo. Yeah, that's just very traditional sounding. But if you listen to some of his other plays, he'll play with electronic instruments and saxophone and so on.
Okay.
And that's like regular banjo. So that's not the best example of what
Big
he's
Country.
able to do.
Maybe Sex in a Pan. I don't know. Let's hear. Let's hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has an electric banjo.
I think we cannot play more because of the copyrights. If not, they will sue us. But yeah. I'm just definitely gonna hear more about this band because it sounds really nice. I really like the bass line and the flow that's having.
Yeah, it's got, like, Victor Wooten is a great bass player, and he was with the Flecktones, and so anyway,
Nice.
I just like the idea of experimenting with something that's a little different that he's able to be successful in.
Nice. I have just one more question for you, and you are free to go. I would like to know about this instrument that is a microphone prototype that you shared with me. That it's like a looper. I'm just gonna play.
Hey, what's up, y'all? My name's Aaron Heatbox Heaton, and I'm here to show you a really cool new microphone prototype from Dan Sullivan. So first of all, you can play loops from it. Add a little guitar, maybe some saxophone.
You can even play the saxophone. It's no more business for us.
Keep it going.
It's so cool.
On top of that, there's crazy things you can do with your voice and record them.
And now he's looping the voice. I mean, it's so cool. How did you come along with this idea?
That was another experiment, I guess. With Zivix, we had created this whole library of interactive loops that work together in time and in sync. So, and at one point we had actually a game for Xbox and PlayStation that we made called Jam Party. But again, came out. You could use a Guitar Hero controller, but instead of reacting to the song, you can push buttons and then interact with these loops. But again, that came out just as Guitar Hero was going away, and so people threw away their controllers, and so that was not a big success. But the idea of, I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's something you can do as a beginner to combine these loops together, but interact with them. So the idea of building in a microphone that you can record your voice on top of and effects, I thought would be an interesting idea. And I showed it to some companies. Nobody really was very interested, but I found one that was, but not so much in that. And now I'm working with a company that is developing more karaoke microphones that can develop something that can process your voice in interesting ways, along with tracking your voice to lead melody and so on. So that's still in development. It's not the same microphone, but it led to something that, again, another zigzag path. But then so I'm not doing anything with that. I love the idea of the interactive looping microphone, but again, it's these are ideas that I was hoping to sort of find. They're more kind of a catalyst to find other people that might want to see the value. But again, as you know, it takes a lot of money and time to get something into commercial production. And a prototype, I like making prototypes because it shows the idea in a physical way that at least is far enough along that people can, it's a credibility issue in terms of getting other, but I was never able to find anybody that took that particular idea of buttons on a microphone to actually kind of fund it or commit enough to be able to get it. Because there's as you know, the prototype can be a long time in making, but then there's another huge mountain you have to manufacture, I think the challenge with engineering, with both software and hardware, is it's one thing to get it so it doesn't, so it works, but the real hard part is to get to the point where it never doesn't not work.
Yeah, exactly.
So all the bugs and this doesn't work and this falls apart. So that requires, a kind of a team of people and a lot of money. So I just try to present ideas and then see where it will go, and it usually doesn't go in a straight line, as I said. It'd be great if somebody out there wants to say, a looping microphone that has a loop spring, because I think I like the idea of just making things that people can have fun with. I mean, life is serious enough, and that's the fun part about music is it can be fun. And so that's why I like to kind of make kind of more toy-like things like that. So
just as now it's just pure curiosity. Is a MIDI controller on a mic?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but
it's a MIDI controller with a mic, but some electronics built in to be able to record.
Okay, exactly.
And play back the voice loops, right?
But you need a computer, right, to trigger all the sound.
Right now you do.
Okay.
Right.
No, it's super cool.
Again, it could go different ways. So.
I really loved it. It was so cool when you shared it to me. So again,
yeah, well, a lot of times I kind of put them on the shelf, and it's a little sad because I get passionate about I get really excited about the idea and get obsessed with it and go to the point, and then have to kind of at some point you can't follow every idea, or else you have to go to the next thing, and
exactly.
It's satisfying again to me to kind of I have this idea to solve the puzzle, because I love engineering, and the challenge was to get to that point, and then it's like once you're done, it's hard. Once I saw a film made by somebody filming Picasso, and he created this. He spent the whole film was him creating this painting, and at the end he burned it into flames.
Wow.
And it's kind of like I know, but I get that, like that a lot of the passion is in the creation part. Once it's done, it's okay. I don't want to look at it. I mean, it's not that you don't want to appreciate what you made, but I think the statement in that film, which was I thought real powerful, is it's really the act of creation that is satisfying. And for me, that's the case. And but then again, if you can do something you really love and make money from it, that's as good as it gets. So I'm expecting that in your future, and I'm sure that you're pretty far on that road to success, because it's very satisfying to see, as I mentioned, that when people want to part with their hard-earned money to buy something that you created, it's very satisfying.
Yeah.
And of course, it helps to pay the bills too. So
exactly. Yeah. Great, Dan. So I think that's it. I have plenty of more questions to ask you, but I think it's gonna be on outside the camera.
Okay, sure.
Again, it's been great. I mean, for me as an engineer and a designer and a music creator, it's an honor to have you here and to be able to chat and ask you some questions. I'm sure that our audience will love your point of view and your your ways of thinking and creating. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I hope I talk to you soon.
Thank you.